Welcome to episode number 1 of Real Talk with Kenny. Every time you buy or sell a house, you need a lawyer to help you close the transaction. Today, I have an honor to have Demar Hewitt with me in the show. Demar is the founder of Hewitt Law Firm. Welcome to the show, Demar.
Thanks for having me, Kenny.
How are you feeling?
Today's a good day.
Every day is a good day.
Today's a good day.
Okay, fantastic. So Demar, first of all, tell us about your journey. How did you become a lawyer? What made you get into the law?
Well, me becoming a lawyer is a very funny story.
Ah.
So I became a lawyer by accident, and
Okay.
I always say by accident because I ended up in law school simply following one of my friends to law school.
Okay.
They were enrolling in law school, and I've decided after following them there to say, I want to enroll.
Just like that.
And next thing you know, I'm enrolled in law school with no idea of how I'm going to pay for it. But, I was now quote unquote trapped and I had to follow through.
Okay.
And so I'm Jamaican.
Okay.
I'm a lawyer from Jamaica.
Is that where you did your law school?
Yes.
How long did you practice in Jamaica?
I practiced in Jamaica for about 3 years.
Okay.
4 years.
4 years. And how long you been practicing here?
I've been practicing here 5 years.
5 years. Okay. So must have been a very different from Jamaica and here. Which one is better?
Lucky for us, we're both Commonwealth countries.
Okay.
So there are obviously there are variations in our laws because this is Canada. Canada has its own laws.
Okay.
Jamaica has its own laws, but we're all governed by the Queen. So
Okay.
there's some similarity in our legal system outside of Quebec.
Okay.
But there's similarity in our legal system.
So how was the transition for you when you came here? Like, was it an easy transition for you or?
Relatively easy. I've heard of persons having it much more difficult than I had it.
Okay.
Maybe because I'm a lawyer and also because we're part of the Commonwealth. I have been coming and going in Canada for a while.
So before you moved here, you have been like.
Yes,
Okay.
I had been in
Okay.
Canada a few times and fell in love with the place.
Wow.
And then next thing you know, found out that this is where I wanted to be.
Okay. Here we are.
Here we are.
Here we are.
Several years later, I've stopped counting, but here we are now.
No, this is good. You know what? It's amazing because at the end of the day, as you said, it was an accident, but it turned out pretty good. I think law is a great career, and I've been working with you for some time, and I can see you're very professional. You're good at what you do, so
Thank you.
that's amazing. Now, Demar, tell me, what is closing cost? Like we always hear, when we talk to clients, we tell them, listen, as a buyer, you need your down payment and closing cost. So tell us, what exactly is closing cost? What's included in the closing cost?
Right, so closing costs are the expenses that you incur or that a client incurs to bring a transaction to the end. I generally relate the story this way. There are 3 persons that are very important to a real estate transaction. You do have the realtor, which is yourself, and you help the person determine whether or not a home is right for them or selling their home for the best price available on the market. You would have a mortgage broker, I also believe is important, and the mortgage broker is the one helping you to get a financing if you're purchasing a property. And then you have the lawyer that brings us all together. The lawyer is the one that you cannot do without in the process.
Yes.
The lawyer brings it all together. And so the closing costs are those expenses now that brings the transaction to an end. For example, your closing cost includes the costs to register title in your name.
Okay.
If you're paying land transfer taxes, the government always collects something.
And that's a big chunk, I believe, land transfer tax and the closing cost.
It can be significant.
Okay.
Because it's tagged to the price of the property that you're purchasing.
Yes.
So land transfer tax is one of those that can be. But there are benefits, of course, you do get. For example, if you're buying a home for the first time, if you're married and both you and your spouse never owned a home before anywhere in the world, this is your very first property. There are rebates that you do get from the government. There are also rebates that you do get if you're buying a brand new home.
Okay.
You do get HST rebates. So there are some things that the government gives you that
Okay.
sort of helps you, ease you into the purchasing of a home, which is really never easy. It's a significant decision, and one that I'm absolutely sure you bear the brunt of, helping person determine whether or not this is their right decision, and which probably leads to my question
Okay.
for you. How do I know when is the right time to buy a home?
So, see, this is a very good question, by the way. So I always say that it depends on your financial situation, right? Because right now, for example, we know interest rates are really, really high. A lot of people are holding off because it's very difficult to afford. However, one thing we know, prices are low. So if your numbers are working in the favor, because look, there's always a risk involved when you're buying. When you're even driving, when you're leaving home, when you're driving, there's always a risk involved. Your job is to make sure, you are doing your numbers, you're doing your homework, you're on the right track. So I always say that if your numbers are fine, you have to look at the bigger picture. If you're buying today, how long are you looking to buy? I always say, look, when you're buying to make your life better. Whether you're buying for yourself to move in or whether you're buying investment property, the key is to help you grow. So you don't want to, come out of your comfort zone, financially, because especially in times like today. So as long as your numbers are fine, you feel like, after buying, it won't have any negative impact on your finances. I feel like it's always a good time, and especially like right now where prices are low. Because look, whether prices are high or low, right now prices are low. And if you're buying as an investor, your goal is to make money. So right now, we know for a little while the rates are going to stay like this. It'll be higher carrying cost. But once the market gets better, that is when you can potentially to see some money. So to answer your question, it depends on your finances and your mindset. What's your objective? How long? What are you trying to accomplish? So it all depends on the individual's financial situation and the mindset.
And as an investor myself, so I do have investment properties.
Yes.
And you think whether or not you should sell, and selling and buying, and I'm supposing that the considerations are slightly different. Me deciding to sell one property and buy another. The markets are low to buy, which might be a good thing, but is it a good time to sell?
You know what? I'll be honest with you, Demar. I don't like selling a lot. I feel like if you have bought a property, don't sell unless you have to sell. Like we are lucky here that we have refinancing options available, where if you have built some equity in your house, you can or a condo, you can always try to refinance if you need some funds. Because holding the property for long term, you're definitely going to make money. So here you have a property which has done well for you, unless you need the money to buy something else, or you need money for some, like let's just say you have something else coming up. I always say, look for reasons where you can keep it and let the property grow.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Yeah.
And that's where, of course, as a lawyer, we come in at the end
Yes.
to make sure that happens.
But you as an investor, though, how are you feeling about the market right now? How do you feel?
Well, you're giving me some reassurance right here. Certainly, I'm anxious. The market is not where it is. As someone who currently owns investment properties, we want to see the market at a higher place. But for those persons looking to come in, I totally understand. They want to see it lower. So I'm anxious, like all investors out there,
Yes.
As to where the market will be next year.
Yes.
I'm not an economist.
Economist. The good thing is here we have a very good market. We have a lot of new immigrants coming in here as well, and there are a lot of people those have made good money in real estate in the last 5-10 years. So right now, as you said earlier, people are holding off. It's not like they don't have money, or they can't afford it. Just that there's a fear in people's mind, which is understandable. You have to be comfortable when you're investing your money. But the good thing is that we know that as soon as this interest rate hike stops, I don't believe, or I don't think the rates are going to go back to where they were anytime soon. But at least once people have that comfort level that, look, the rates have kind of stopped increasing and they're starting to come down, then we're going to see a big jump of buyers coming into the market. And that's when you can expect, when, of course, how does prices go up, right? When there's a more demand and less supply. So that's what happened in the last 2-3 years. So when a lot more buyers enter in the market, that's when you'll start to see multiple offers. That's when you'll see prices jumping up. And the good thing is, if a house has already sold, if let's just say one house has sold for 1.5 year ago, 2 years ago, now it's going for $1 million. There's a very good probability that it's going to go back up to that range very soon once things get back up. So it all depends, depends on the situation. But right now, again, if someone has the money, if they can, sit on, if they can afford the monthly mortgage and carrying cost, I think this is a very good opportunity for a lot of people to get in the market and eventually make some money moving forward.
And I think that when you determine if you have the money, following on what you just said, in addition to the closing cost, the ability to carry the mortgage, and we spoke about closing costs earlier, and one of the, I don't want to say trap, but one of the errors I think that I usually see in persons determining whether or not they have the financing to close a transaction is, for example, making sure that they account for everything that will be a part of the process of them acquiring this property. For example, if you've decided to get a mortgage, when I receive mortgage instructions acting for you, there are certain things that I look out for in alerting you that, hey, this is the amount of money you're going to need.
Okay, so question for you, which I'm sure viewers are probably wondering, what is instructions when you say
instructions? So instructions is the direction we receive from the bank or from your lender.
Okay.
If you're buying a property, if it is that you're getting a mortgage or some sort of loan to get the funds to acquire that property, we receive instructions. So this is the lender telling us as a lawyer acting for the purchasers, these are the things I need the purchaser to take care of before I give them the money to buy this property. So instructions are those directions. It's that letter that lists all the things that we need to get done on our side. Or
like the conditions of the bank that they have on the mortgage. That's something that you also...
Of course, certainly. Okay. The conditions will come out in the instructions.
Without conditions, no money.
Certainly.
Sorry, we always, like you always hear, has instructions arrived? I always bug you before the closing. So
yeah, conditions are usually a part of that. So when we receive those instructions or the things that are listed in your mortgage commitment, it gives me an idea of where you need to be. And I say that it's a difficulty that I come across quite a few times, where several of those fees the purchaser probably would not have kept in mind. And so it's important for us to have an actual idea. And I always say budget an extra 1% above, you think you have the numbers down pat, an extra 1%.
There's always unexpected things coming. You don't want to be stuck at the time of closing and short funds, right? I mean, that's the worst thing.
Certainly. You want to do. Because things that we know, ordinarily speaking, the bank covers 80% of the value of the property. Okay. It's not a set rule, or the lender covers 80% of the property. Not a set rule. Sometimes they can go as high as 95%. But if we work with 80% as the average, right? But then depending on who the lender is, things that may form part of your closing costs if you're using a Schedule A bank, for example, the big box banks that we know, the CIBC, RBC, TD, Scotiabank, TD, things that will form part of your closing costs. You may have lower closing costs if you use one lender as against another lender. Yes, okay. So that's one thing. But your ability to qualify for the mortgage is something that your mortgage
which is similar,
agent,
I feel, yeah.
Your mortgage agent. But I was just about to make the point that, for example, your closing costs working through a mortgage broker would include things like your mortgage broker fee. So certainly when you're calculating your 80%, you need to think about your mortgage broker fee, for example, as a part of your closing costs. And if you're working with probably a Schedule B bank or a private lender or a mortgage investment company, you need to think of things like a lender fee.
Higher fees.
Exactly.
Higher fees involved.
Those do form part of your closing costs. And you do find when you're having transactions, if you don't, because in a lot of the circumstances, when you go out shopping, you may not have a pre-approval, so you don't really know where you're getting the mortgage from.
Yes.
But when you do your calculation, now that you have a lender, you now need to factor in those things, that your closing costs will increase based on who you decide to move.
And I like what you say, always count a bit higher than what actually you think it's going to be, because look, it's better to have more than less. So it's important. But question for you, when does a lawyer comes into play in a transaction? When does your work start?
So the lawyer work starts once you do have a firm agreement.
Okay.
So you have, generally speaking, the process of buying a property, for example, you do have Kenny.
Okay.
That will help the person to find that home if they're purchasing, or help the person to find the right purchaser for the home if they're selling. If you're buying, you do have the mortgage broker that will come in. Not mandatory, but generally speaking, you have a mortgage broker that shops around for you, help you to find financing to complete your purchase. The lawyer is the one that brings it all together.
Okay.
The lawyer is the one who makes sure that the mortgage is properly documented and registered on your title, and making sure that title gets into your name based on what was agreed between you and the purchasers through your realtor.
Okay.
So the lawyer comes in at the end to make sure the transaction
comes to completion. So what I like to do usually, which so the key is once, let's just say the transaction is firmed up, the agreement has been established, and then right away the key is to send in the agreement and MLS to the lawyer. So that way, someone like yourself can start the work, whatever homework you need, whatever you get you in touch with the client. So whatever you need from the client, you can get. So that way, we're not leaving anything to the last minute.
Certainly. And if you can even get it to the lawyer before you actually do have a firm agreement, sometimes can be advantageous, right?
I know, for example, when you buy a condo, there's always a status certificate clause, right? So that needs to be reviewed by a lawyer before the deal is firmed up. So I feel like in condos, it becomes a little bit easier because that way lawyer's already involved way before the deal is firm. So that way you can just move forward based on where you are. Now, one question for you, Demar. So what happened? These days, a lot of sellers are concerned or worried that when the house is sold, for some reasons, buyer is not able to close. What are the consequences or what are the options at that time?
So if a buyer is unable to close a transaction as a seller, the options you have, generally speaking, you can forfeit the deposit. Okay. So having a nice deposit as a part of the agreement is a good thing for the seller.
And sorry, just want to add one thing. So that's why when we, let's just say if I'm the listing agent, we always try to get a higher deposit. That way, in case if anything goes wrong, we are in the possession of a higher deposit.
Yes, so a deposit is very important and very useful too, right? Because that's money that you have sitting in trust, either generally with your brokerage, or with your lawyer, depending on where the agreement is that the money sits. So it's sitting down in trust. If the transaction does not close, you do have access to that. But then, of course, if it is that you have to resell the property, then you are able, and you sell the property for less, then you're able to sue the buyer or the would-be buyer that failed to close the transaction. You can, in fact, sue them to recover the shortfalls. For example, if they had agreed to purchase your property at $800,000 and they are unable to close, you're now in a down market and you now have to sell it for $700,000. You do get to sue them for that extra $100,000, plus some of the carrying costs that you incurred because of the delay in closing the transaction.
And roughly how long, what's the duration for this to be processed? Like, let's just say if somebody sues somebody for this, how long do you think it may take?
It depends on where you are. Generally, we have different regions of court. Some of them are really backlogged. Some of them are just way, up to current in what's happening. It also depends on if the party is involved, and if they're very litigious and they're resisting it. You can easily be done with the court process 6 months in some cases. Other times it may take you a year, or even more than a year.
But honestly, like, I've been in the business for almost 9 years, and we haven't seen this much happening. I feel like there are always ways to sort things out. That's the last resort, right? Going into suing and all. There are always options available, like, try to work with the seller. But it can get complicated, let's just say, if the buyer is not able to close. Now, one more question for you. When somebody is choosing a lawyer, what are the 3 things they should look for?
Well, certainly, lawyer, I think service is always most important. A lawyer certainly has to be a lawyer that practices real estate. In Ontario, you have to be licensed to practice real estate. So not all lawyers can do real estate. It does require additional insurance to get that authorization to do real estate. Experience is also something that I think is significant. And generally, accessibility. I always find, and I'm a buyer, and I have lawyers too, right? That act for
so you
me.
Use other lawyers. Were you happy with them?
Yeah, certainly. I will say this, I'm one of those persons, even though I'm a lawyer, I don't represent myself. I always believe when you're involved in the transaction directly, your mind can be clouded, right? I don't represent myself.
But can you do you have that option available? Can you represent yourself?
In a real estate transaction, no.
Oh, no,
Certainly, would not, because it does. Obviously, it's a conflict.
Yes.
It is a conflict. And even while strictly speaking, there are circumstances where I could represent somebody I'm connected to, or even a company I'm connected to. I might look on it and say it's best that I not, because you want outside eyes to look. Because, put it this way, if anything should go wrong or should not have gone the way it was supposed to go, then you want to have somebody else to reach out to say, hey, you did not do this. What happened here? But you can't blame yourself. Come on.
Yeah, you can. You can. And a lot of emotions involved too. Even for us too, like when, let's just say, many realtors, when they're selling their own home, sometimes they choose other realtors to list their home because just to kind of keep it easier. As I said, a lot of emotions are involved. You want to be logical when you're going through the transaction. So it's really, really important, I guess, in that case. And honestly, like, I have been working with you. Like, one thing about you is that all of my clients really love the service that you have offered. You're always available. I feel like it's really important to be available, for the clients, because look, they're going through, it's a big deal for them. For us, let's say realtors or lawyers, it could be just another transaction, right? It's an everyday thing for us. But for the buyer or seller, this is a very, very important deal, right? So it's really important to be there for them when they have any questions, when they're concerned, just to kind of make the process easier for them. So I feel like that's really, really important part, as you said, somebody with the experience, as you said, of course, licensed and qualified, and being there for the people.
Certainly. Thank you for that. And if I should flip that question back at you, I would ask, so in me deciding to dispose of one of my properties, and I know you say you don't do it in this market and you don't like it, Well, what are the things I'm looking for? Certainly, in my mind, I'm an investor. Dollars and cents make, a big difference,
Yes.
right? Especially in a down market. So cost in my head is a big factor. But in addition to that, what are the things that I'm looking for in determining, for example, do I use Kenny to sell this kind of property? It's a commercial property.
Yeah,
as
use
against a
Kenny. You
residential
should use
property.
Kenny.
But what are the considerations, I suppose, in determining what Kenny will give me
Yes.
if I decide to use Kenny to sell a commercial property
Yeah.
or a regular residential
Yes.
property?
No, good question. I think it's a really important question. So I feel like it's a sales, right? It's basically a relationship business. So I always tell people before you choose a realtor, interview 2 to 3 people, see how you feel, because look, it's product or service is not the most important part here. It's how the whole process, the communication you have, the experience you have, as a realtor. So for me, the important thing is knowing the market. It's really important thing. And experience, you can't buy experience, right? The more transactions you have done, the better idea you have. And for me, I have a background in banking, so I used to do personal banking, mortgages before, where I've done a lot of detail. Like I've looked at the things differently, right? So for me, it's important to look at the bigger picture for the client. It's just not buying or selling. It's you have to ask for their goals. What are their long-term plans? So understanding the client's needs, objectives, and goals. So I feel like it's important to work with somebody who has this kind of mindset instead of just hey, let's list right away or sell right away, right? Of course, negotiation skills is very important as well, because in a transaction you are presenting the seller. Like let's just say if you're selling or buying, you want someone to present you who knows what they're doing, who has your best interest above everything, right? So at many times we have seen cases where somebody comes to me and they wanted to sell, but after we had gone through the whole conversation, we decided that selling might not be the best thing to do at this time, or overall, maybe refinance if you. So it all depends. So I feel like important to have somebody with good customer service skills, somebody with the looking at the bigger picture mindset, and somebody who is very creative. It's a very again, it's not just said you list the house and it's going to sell. You want to maximize for the sellers. You want to be able to maximize, because look, man, they worked hard for the money, right? So they're trusting you with this, so you want to be able to maximize their profits. Same thing for buyer. It's a little bit different concept, but for buyer, of course, guiding them through the process. Like I have helped people, again, in 9 years, I have had people starting with even $25,000 as a down payment on the first home. But with the right strategy, with the right approach, those people are sitting over $1.5, $2 million net worth today, because this is where the experience comes into play, where you guide people how to maximize on the equity part.
And would you agree with the thinking then that I would get more from using your services as against, for example, using a service like listed by owner, where I can just put it up on the MLS myself and just do all of this myself?
I mean, you can do that. I believe it's literally 1 or 2% people those do that, right? Like 98 to 99% homes are sold through a real estate channel, and you gotta let the professionals do their job. These days you can learn everything from Google, YouTube, but you know what? Experience still counts, and at the end of the day, like even a small mistake can cost you a lot, because this you're dealing with a few $100,000, right? So same thing for you as a lawyer as well. I'm sure you have noticed like many times, a small mistake, if you don't know what you're doing, and if you make a small mistake, that could be very, very costly, and that could, whatever small money you were trying to save, at the end of the day, you might end up, it might end up costing you a lot more than you even expected.
And speaking of small mistakes, something that I certainly see a lot on my side. Well, not a lot, but when, there are small things that will pop up on closing that really traps a person. The conditions that come up in those agreements, the conditions that you choose to waive.
Yes.
You deciding to go in with a clean offer.
Yes.
Because you want to win.
Get the deal. You want to get the deal. Yes.
The deal. I'll tell you, on the flip side, my concerns with that, but certainly I'll get from you first. When you're putting a deal forward, give me the thinking behind, whether or not to attach a condition.
Okay. Honestly, if you have a choice, I always say go with the conditions to have a peace of mind, because especially if you're a first-time home buyer. But when the market is very competitive, when you are competing with like 5, 6, 7, 10 offers, at that time, it's almost impossible for you to go ahead with the conditions, because sellers are looking for a clean offer. But let's just say if the property has been there for some time, they don't have any other offer, or maybe 1 or 2, you want to try to get the conditions, because especially condition of financing, as we were talking earlier. I think that could really cause a lot of issues if the homework was not done on time. And again, home buying should be a happy experience. When you miss one or two things, it could be really, really difficult at the end. So, fine. So it all depends. If you are able to get it, you should always try to get the conditions.
Very well. So, are there minimum conditions that you would recommend that are always there?
Like, there are mainly three main conditions, right? Like standard, there's standard, but three main important. One is, of course, financing, condition of financing, inspection condition, where you want to inspect the house, and for condos we have the status certificate condition.
Okay.
For status, as you know. So actually, you tell me, Demar. So for status certificate, what exactly are you looking?
Well,
when you're reviewing the status certificate?
I'll tell you about status certificate, and then I'll pivot back to inspection, because inspection is one that I think is probably one of the most important one. So when a lawyer acting on a purchase of an existing home, generally we look at status certificate there. For new condos, we would still look at status certificate, but because it's new, probably there's a lower degree of worry. For existing condos, that's when, generally speaking, you're looking to make sure that all the things that the seller promised in the agreement is there. You want to flag the client for things like, is the rules of the condo. For example, you want to have an idea of what the client is going to use the property for. Does the client have a pet? Does a condo
So it says in the status certificate if they can have a pet or not.
Right. Okay. Yes. So you want to know what they're using it for. If they're using it for an investment, for example, where they intend to do Airbnb or anything like that, are there restrictions in doing something like that?
Okay.
If the client wants to use it for this regular living, are there a limit on the amount of persons that can live in? You do have condos that come with occupancy limits. The pet is a big ticket one. You want to make sure that you have that. And anything else, the general lifestyle of the client, is that one that accords with the rules of the condo, and can the client live within the rules of the condo? Because a lot of persons are not familiar with condo living. Especially if as an owner, it's one thing to live there as a tenant, and your landlord is the one that has to worry and fight with the board.
Yes.
But when you become an owner, the obligation is yours to make sure that your unit conforms with the rules of the condo. Make sure that you can live within the guidelines of the condo. And so having that discussion with them, understanding where their mindset is, what they intend to use the property for, and then bringing them up to speed. Okay, well, this is allowed, that's not allowed. Is this property right for you then? Can you live by these guidelines? Another big ticket one, condo fees. You want to make sure that you understand what the condo fees are. The condo is, should tell you, I'm a condo guy at heart. I live in a house, but I'm a condo guy at heart.
But you like condos
because the ease of living in a condo, somebody else takes care of that. Yeah,
no snow, no grass, nothing.
Everybody knows it. Having to plow snow is not nice. I should tell you.
Yes,
but that's how the convenience comes at a cost. So making sure that you understand, the cost of that convenience is also one thing. And then just generally, living in a closer neighborhood. You're in a community where you're separated by walls. In some cases, very thin walls, where you can hear what's happening upstairs, downstairs, or even beside you, right? It's not like you have a separation of a small strip of land or two separate walls between you and your neighbor when you live in a detached home. So that's just making sure that there's that condition in mind of being in such a small community space, coexisting with other people. So those are things that you look for in a condo
And what
agreement.
about the money part? Like, I think there's
So I know where you're going to. Yes, reserve fund. So we will tell you what the reserve funds are. We'll tell you based on what we could see in the status certificate.
And what is exactly reserve funds?
So the reserve fund are the savings, the money that the condo puts aside. Legally, they have to put aside a certain amount of money. Each year it increases, or based on their audit that is done periodically, which they must do by law, to determine how much money to put aside based on the age of the condo and a number of things. Things are likely to break. And we don't want, when these things break, for you to levy $100,000 cess on owners, right? So the law requires them to periodically put a little bit of money aside each year. You take it from owners.
From the condo fee it's coming, you put some money on the side and
Well, technically comes from the owners,
Okay.
but it might just form part of your condo fees.
Okay.
So the owners are putting aside a little bit each month to contribute towards the reserve fund based on the assessment, based on the likelihood of things breaking and how much it would cost if those things break.
Okay.
So that you are not you don't get a huge levy in the end. So we will look to see what the reserve fund looks like and what are the plans the condo has to make repairs. And in most cases, the lawyer doesn't per se get into the accounts of it, but we can look and say if the reserve fund's $100,000, this is a 20-year-old building. We know the older the building gets, the more likely things are to break, and the condo is planning to implement these things that it's going to cost $1 million or even $500,000. We would say, based on what we're seeing, it's likely that a levy would come against the owners, because 100 and 500,000 worth of plans, there must be some form of levy to cover the shortfall, 400,000 or shortfall.
Okay, so the key is the more the better.
Certainly, the bigger the reserve fund, the better, and probably the younger the condo also, the better, because you have less worry,
less problems, less. Okay, so inspection, you were asking me, like, what did you like?
So the most agreements that I've seen, and certainly it seems to be the standard for the profession, is that you do get that opportunity to go in and do. So one, you could decide to go inspection free, which is no inspection at all, clean agreement, but you reserve the right to do visits in the end. And I always, every time I'm having a discussion with my clients, I say, make sure that when you go, you turn on everything, the stove, the dishwasher, the washer, dryer, everything, make sure you turn it on. Maybe what concerns me a lot of times is shortly after persons move into a property, and now you're there living in it, you can see the cracks on the wall, you can see a wet spot in the basement or something, but you went into the property inspection free. Sorry, you went into the purchase, inspection free, right? Which generally gives the thinking that you're willing to take it as is. I'm wondering, at least from where you sit, when realtors decide to do a clean offer with no inspection, right? Is there any sort of preliminary work? What would you do? Because your client, it's a very competitive market. Your client wants to go in with a clean offer to increase the chance of them getting, their bid being accepted. So no inspection. What is it that you're looking for as a realtor to make sure that when they move in 3 months later, there's not a crack in the basement?
I mean, like, one thing we have to accept, right? If the house is like 15, 20 years old, there's always going to be minor things in the house. What we look for is, when we are going without the condition of inspection, roof is a big thing. Roof can cost a lot of money, so we want to see, like, even before we put the offer, we can see how old is the roof, because the life of the roof is around 15 to 20 years. So if the roof was put in like 3-4 years ago, we are comfortable that, look, it's good for another 10-12 years. Furnace is another important thing. We can see how old the furnace's life is, again, 10-15 years. We make sure that we check every single thing as much as we can. Appliances is another thing, washer, dryer, plumbing. So this, again, we're not home inspectors, but we do as much as we can just to make sure all the day-to-day stuff is in good working order. And as you mentioned that, we may not have a home inspection condition, but we always put 2 visits before the closing for the buyer's peace of mind. So that's another thing before we go. Like, one, we leave it, we can take him anytime if they want to show to the family, but 1 visit we leave it till the end, just before the closing, maybe a day or 2 days before the closing. By then the sellers should have moved out of the house. The house should be in good condition. That is when we do our own final thing, just to make sure everything is in good working order. Because I believe that once the deal has closed and you find out something, that something's a problem, I feel like at that time it becomes a little bit challenging to sort things out. So it's important to do your due diligence, do your homework, and check as much as you can. That is why we have those two visits there for you.
Very good. Very good to have those visits. It's extremely difficult
Yeah.
to solve these issues after.
And honestly,
the
like, look,
person
from the
moves.
seller's point of view, look, the home is sold. Like, it's not an easy transaction, anyways, right? There's lots going on. So this is where the realtor comes into play. It's their job to make sure that before the closing, you have checked everything. It's mainly at the same time. Sometimes what we do is just for the peace of mind for for the buyers. Even though we don't have a condition of inspection in the house, because we understand, as you said, very competitive market, we can still we advise homeowners to, or buyers to do an inspection post, after the close, just for their peace of mind, just to check everything is in good order. Because honestly, there was a time in the market where going with the inspection was almost impossible. Like, if you send the offer with the inspection, good luck, or conditions of good luck, you're not gonna get it. So we had no other choice. We had no choice other than going in firm. So it's important for a realtor to make sure they do their homework correct.
Yes, very, very important.
Just to make it a smooth process, right?
Especially if you decide to go in. So I'll tell you from where I sit as a lawyer, closing lawyer, and these do pop up quite often for those. Because whenever you purchase a property, and I can totally understand, you spend almost $1 million if you're buying anywhere in the GTA. If you're in Toronto, you have to be above $1 million, right? To buy a detached home. Condo, of course, you can come in under $1 million. And probably less worries in condos, but for detached homes, obviously that's where the whole inspection thing is so significant. And the thing that I see when you move into a house, you want it to be perfect. You've just shelled out thousands of dollars to get
all
into
your
this
savings.
place. Yes.
You've been saving for a long time.
Exactly, totally wiped you out. Things pop up in the end that you have to pay for that you didn't budget for, and now you're at zero, if not in the negative, because you've encashed even your line of credit. That's the reality of where we are. So you don't have money to fix things. So when you get into the house and you see that there's a crack somewhere, or the stove is not turning on, or there's a leak from something, it is really frustrating. And then I get the calls here as a lawyer that the oven is not turning on, or the dishwasher is not connected, or something, right? Or my
AC is not working.
Exactly, right? I say to think there's some things that so the difference between what we call patent defects and latent defects. Patent are the ones that you could see, very clearly see, walk in, that's the deficiency that needs to be addressed. Latent defects are the things that are hidden, that we could not see going there. So if it's behind, for example, a more common one, a crack in the basement wall, there is the basement foundation, sidewall, and then there is coverage.
Even on the floor, you see sometimes if the basement is unfinished. You
exactly,
may see some
if
cracks.
you could. But if it's finished and it's behind the finishing, then obviously you can't see.
Yes.
It's not so obvious. So a crack in the wall that's behind the drywall in the basement, you won't see. We say that's latent, it's hidden. Patent are the ones that are very obvious. You walk in even by a naked eye. I always say to clients, think of it this way, whenever I do get those calls. If you move into the house and the next day you're there just doing a regular thing and you see a defect, it's probably more likely that it's patent.
Okay.
Because it's obvious. You could see it, any ordinary person could see it, and if you'd done an inspection, an inspector would have seen it. It is difficult to hold a seller liable for patent defects, right? Things that you could see.
You should have noticed it before the closing.
Yeah, exactly. These are things. So it's difficult. So you want to make sure that you, especially if you had no inspection, you really do scrutinize things. You move away the art that's on the wall. If there's a piece of furniture up against the wall, I know a lot of times when I have these discussions with clients, I say, don't be afraid to pull the furniture away from the wall. Don't be afraid to turn the stove on. You're in their house, they're still there, they may not have fully moved out, and you feel a little bit cute, timid. You don't want to seem like you're really invading their space. But once they go out, it's now your space. So consider it yours the couple of days you're there before, and give it a thorough inspection the best you can yourself.
Very important.
To make sure that once they're gone, you're not fighting to get these things on. Because once they get the money and they moved on,
then good luck.
Good luck.
Then it's hard.
It is a challenge 100%. Getting anything done.
And that's why, as a realtor, like, it's really important for us to make sure that before closing, we do as much as we can to make sure everything is in good working order. Because look, for buyers, they're putting everything in the house. They're very excited. A lot of emotions are involved. They don't want to come inside and find out something that could have easily been avoided. So it's really important from our side. So Demar, last question for you. Now, as a lawyer, what advice would you give to people those are trying to become a lawyer or, about a profession of law? Like, what's your advice to those people? What are your thoughts?
Well, certainly depends on the area of law that you want to get into.
Okay.
That's good. I always say that, and I think this, touches on the question you asked earlier in determining the lawyer you select. I believe, and I've had that discussion before, selecting a lawyer that's within the group of persons that are working together to get your transaction completed is very important. So I believe if the real estate agent, the mortgage broker, the lawyer are persons who ordinarily work together, then transaction will be so much smoother for you. Because we're connected, we're on cell phone, we're a call away. Hey Demar, what do you think about this condition? The mortgage broker will call me, Demar, what do you think about this? Will this be an issue on closing? Or you calling me to say, I'm thinking of doing this, my client is thinking of doing that. How will that affect closing? And I would say, okay, these are the safeguards you can put in place. You want to do a clean offer, make sure that you do these things though. So at least we have something to piggyback on in the end. So that's how you select if you're going to work with a lawyer that also works with your real estate agent or your mortgage broker. So that's one. In determining if you want to be a lawyer, I think that the network that you are involved in is very important. It's networking as a lawyer is something important for us. I'm in real estate as the larger part of my practice. Having those relationships with real estate agents like yourself, having mortgage brokers that you talk to, having lenders that you're familiar with and do business with. If you have that kind of network, then it makes it easier for you getting into law and then branching out in that particular area. So you want to start networking in the area before. I think that gives you a launching pad when you get in. Okay. But if you don't, doesn't mean that you don't have to be a lawyer. It's one of those professions that allow you to scale very fast. Mm-hmm. It's work getting into the league, and it's expensive being a lawyer.
Absolutely.
I tell people this all the time, that our fees don't reflect the amount it costs.
100%.
We have significant expenses to maintain your license
100%.
each year. But the cost to getting into the profession is high, maintaining your license is high, but it allows you to scale very fast.
Okay. So, and of course, I feel like your personality. Now, so I know you have 2 locations. So please tell the viewers about where are your offices and
yes,
the kind of services.
Well, so my primary office is in Toronto.
Okay.
Satellite, I do have one in Mississauga. I'm currently negotiating another one in the east,
expanding
in Oshawa. Yes.
Nice.
So that's where I'm negotiating the 3rd office right now. So that's coming on. But everything is done online these days.
Okay.
Lucky for us, COVID
changed everything.
COVID changed everything. We had a few lenders who were iffy and butty about electronic signatures. Now, practically all lenders except one that I know.
Who's that lender?
It's a private lender,
Okay,
so luckily it's a private lender.
Okay.
But all the banks
are okay with
all
that.
the Schedule Bs.
You can be at home and everything could be done, like
Yes,
all the
certainly.
signs and everything.
Certainly.
Even the down payment money that can be given to your, like, they don't need to come to your office. They can deposit the money into your account.
I'll say this.
Yeah.
I rarely do meet clients in person these days.
You rarely meet, okay.
And certainly, and just to give you where we are post-COVID now in closing transactions, we are meeting online to go through the documents. You're signing the documents via DocuSign or Adobe Sign. You're depositing the monies to close the transaction in my bank account, so we're not meeting in person for that, and you're accessing your keys from a lockbox.
Okay.
Certainly, it's not that we are now hands off, but we try to make it more convenient for you. Back in the day, we'd of course met to go through the documents, hand you your keys, all the stuff.
Yeah.
You have to worry about trekking to the lawyer's office.
Yeah.
Now it doesn't really matter where the lawyer is, right? Because you're online. And
absolutely.
You know where the property you're buying is. So I give you the code, you go, you grab your keys. My job after you've received your keys is to make sure that you get into the place, make sure that everything that should be there is there. I want to make sure, have you collected your keys? Yes. Have you moved in? I'm in the process of moving in. I haven't. All right. Do you think you could get that tomorrow, at least walk through the property? I want to know early in whether there's something that's not working too well. That's, the after sales service. It's not just to give you the keys and say, okay, good luck. I want to, if there's something that we need to address, now that it's fresh, let's address it right now, instead of doing it a month or even 2 weeks later. People have moved on 2 weeks later, right?
Absolutely.
So the day after is quite important.
Yeah, I always say don't put closing on Friday.
Oh,
Fridays
yes,
don't
yes,
close.
that's
Put Thursday or Wednesday, so in case if anything, up and down. Like if it's Friday, then you have to wait till Monday.
I understand.
But-
I understand the need to close. I understand the need to close on Friday because
Yeah.
I mean you get Saturday, the weekend to move, right?
Yes,
And especially
yes.
if you're working and stuff.
Yeah.
But I totally get
Yeah,
it, and that's
yeah.
why I always also try to close transactions as early as possible.
In the day,
right?
so
in
that
the
way
day,
there's no delay.
so you have some time because
Yeah.
most law offices close at 4:30.
Especially Friday, they want to go
Friday,
home.
yes.
Yeah, perfect. Demar, thank you so much. Pleasure to have you.
Oh, thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me. I'll be here again if you want me.